I'm Heather.
And I'm Desiree.
And you're listening to
the Perpetually Overdue Podcast. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Perpetually Overdue Podcast. I am Desiree.
And I am Heather.
And today we are talking about writing routines. If you've listened to our past episodes, then you would know that both Heather and I are writers. And so we wanted to chat because I know I love looking up writing routines on YouTube or social media. So we figured this was definitely something that maybe other writers or just curious readers would like to know. And that's, like I said, our writing routines, realistic and expectation scenario. Yes. Pretty much, and maybe even some of our struggles. So I'm excited to chat about this because, like I said, one of my favorite things to watch on YouTube.
True. I actually haven't watched a lot of videos on writing routines. I tend to watch videos on hobbies because I don't know what I'm doing a lot of the times. But I feel the most confident when it comes to writing. There are other avenues of where I've gotten information in regards to some of the things that I can do to help my writing. So I'll share that as well. And then just apologies. I am in the midst of a move right now. So if it's a little echoing here, it's because most of the things in this room are gone, except for bookshelves and my backdrop, which will all come down as soon as we're done filming today.
Exactly, which is fun. If you go to YouTube, then you'll definitely be familiar with Heather's background. Yeah. But I can already imagine the scenario of, like, let's say if Nick, her husband, walked into the room, it's like this little area where she's at of stuff and then empty.
It's crazy. The desk is still there, and then I have plants and some Lego sets. But that's pretty much all of our books are over there.
Ooh,
and all weird. The new bookshelves. So one day, exciting. Yeah, it is exciting. One day we'll do a behind the scenes and I'll give a little library tour.
Ooh, we can do that as a YouTube short and a TikTok and Instagram reel. So definitely follow us on social media and YouTube so you guys don't miss out on that.
So what is your writing routine like when you sit down and you're like, okay, there's a blank screen in front of me? Once you go through the panic of having a blank screen in front of you, because we all experience that panic. How do you typically get started? Because I know for me, there's a specific way I get started. And if I'm stuck, I have to pivot to something else. So how do you get started on your writing?
So a more realistic scenario is when I have a writing day and I know I need to get words in. When I get to my desk, it has to be in my desk. I wish I was one of those people who can take their laptop anywhere, their couch, whatever. I have yet been able to do that. I can't seem to function that way. Like I have to properly sit at my desk to do writing. So when I'm at my desk, I open up either Scrivener, which is a writing program I was gifted a couple years ago. Before Scrivener, I used to pay monthly for a program called Dabble. And it was Dabble Writer. I loved it because it automatically kind of formatted everything for you as you wrote. And then instantly you can say next chapter and it will go to a new. Yeah, and it was very nice. The sidebar had it all organized. So I really enjoyed it. But again, financially, I mean, it was only $10 a month, but it just wasn't in my budget anymore.
Yeah.
And once someone had gifted me Scrivener, it was actually my co-writer who did. It felt like I should use this because someone paid for it. So either I use Scrivener or Google Docs now, and I will open that up. I will open up my file, usually to a blank page for a new chapter. And then I always have to have my notebook. I very much process through actually writing stuff down. I'm not a verbal processor, so I can't do dictation like some of my friends do. My brain, I can't. So instead, I will jot things down to work through them. So I have my notebook. I have Notion, which is another online program. It's free that I have. Thanks to my co-writer, she is a wizard at Notion. So she created story Bible templates for us.
That's right, yes.
So I usually have like a quick little outline of like more or less the chapters I want to write. I always have to have either a body doubling video up. If it's not that, it's a Pomodoro sprint site like Wonderspace, which is also free. Very aesthetic. It's really cute.
I'm learning so much.
I know. And if it's not Wonderspace, then usually some type of atmospheric kind of aesthetic video on YouTube that has music lightly in the background. I'll have that on another screen. Because I need to, I guess it's the ADHD in me. I need to be stimulated while also not too stimulated, but stimulated enough.
Yes, and I will talk about my own things when it gets to my turn, but yes, I get you.
And then, of course, I always have excessively 3 drinks on my desk. I'll have a coffee, I'll have my water, and I'll randomly have something else, whether it's a seltzer water or my electrolyte drink, or it's not even something I consciously do, but I did notice throughout time, never fails. So
okay. This is why you get more writing done than me, because wait till it gets to be my turn. Totally different.
And this isn't even like my ideal, like this is just
what you actually do.
Yeah. And then the last thing is that usually for me, I need to work in 45-minute sprints.
Nice. Okay.
I say quotation sprints because people argue 45 minutes is not a sprint. It's what we call it at this point. It's a Pomodoro term. And so that's the sweet spot for me because it's just long enough for me to finally get into the groove and get just enough done that when it's break time, I feel now motivated to continue. Yeah. And so that's pretty much like my routine when I sit down.
Yeah. Because of the ADHD, there's a lot there to consider. Some things I didn't know until later educating myself on ADHD and why I am the way that I am with certain things. I am very similar to you where I do need some sort of stimuli in terms of like staying focused, but I can't have certain ones because it's either triggers my ADHD rage or it overstimulates me, which then triggers my ADHD rage. So for me, body doubling was something that my therapist told me about. I didn't know what that was beforehand. I didn't know what Pomodoro sessions were before your Twitch streams. My therapist recommended body doubling because I told her how hard it was for me to sit still for long periods of time, concentrating on one thing. Now, there is something with ADHD called hyperfocus, and when I get into that mode, oh, baby, I could write for hours. And this is why when you talked about the sprinting thing, I relate to it because yes, while 45 minutes might seem like a lot for some people, when you're in ADHD hyperfocus, you don't want to break that. Because to even get there is difficult. And once you're there and you get interrupted, it can trigger that ADHD rage response in you where you get really pissed off and irritated because you were focused.
Yeah.
So I take advantage of those times. 90% of the time, I would say I would use that hyperfocus for cleaning. So I'm trying to learn how to transition that into writing.
Nice.
Body doubling definitely helps, but it has to be very specific. I cannot have people drinking things. I cannot have talking. I don't even really like music. I like the sound of the keyboard.
Nice.
That
but more like the
me.
ASMR type body doubling.
Exactly. And I prefer that to the Pomodoro sessions because I know that you get like a break, and sometimes when people break, they talk.
Yeah.
And if I'm in that hyper focus and I'm like going and the words are flowing out of me, I don't want to deal with. There have been times where I've used a Pomodoro video and I'll see that it's getting to the end and I'll just quickly rewind and keep going. Just like rewind, keep going, rewind, keep going. So that's why it doesn't always work for me. I like when they're 4-hour videos. I'm like, yes. And those are usually, like you said, the ASMR ones. I have to have nobody in the room with me. Not my dog, not my husband. No one talk to me. No one look at me. No one breathe in my direction. And this is just for the sake of focusing because I will find every distraction. Preferably not have my phone near me if I can help it. Now it's not an issue, but before I used to have social media apps. Now all my social media apps are strictly on my iPad. So that helps a lot because I don't really have much to go to for distraction, but I still have the YouTube app on my phone. So there's always still the possibility for a distraction. I like to have coffee. I would love to say that I have water near me for hydration purposes, but Desiree knows me. I'm not a big drinker, period, like juice, water, anything.
That has been her lifelong struggle.
Yeah. It's not always in my mind to like get my bottle of water, bring it with me. I always have it on my bedside because usually I'll go into a coughing fit in the middle of the night and need it. But I usually have coffee. If I don't do body doubling, if I don't do a Pomodoro session, let's say I'm writing something and I want inspiration, I'll put music on. But it has to be very specific. Sometimes it can't have any lyrics whatsoever. It's just instrumental. But I want it to give me that feeling of, if I'm writing like this epic battle scene, I want something that invokes that feeling. Or if I'm writing a love scene, I want something that invokes those feelings. So it all just depends on what it is that I'm doing. But to be honest, that is when I can get my ass in the seat and actually do it. I too have an issue with where is the most comfortable because coffee shops are way distracting for me. Even with noise canceling headphones, I still get distracted.
I'm hyper aware of everyone and everything. Yeah.
And there's always that one person that thinks that you need to hear their conversation.
God, I'm remembering this the last time we went when I was visiting. That person, I was like, dude.
Every word.
And not even like the way we're talking now. Projecting. No. Full on.
Like, this is the me show and you're all just extras in it kind of vibes.
Yeah.
It was very obnoxious. And I wanted to say something. The Puerto Rican in me wanted to be like, can you shut the fuck up? But I refrained. I also had new headphones that didn't have the best noise canceling. So it was really difficult for me because she was already being super loud. And then on top of that, I could hear her through the headphones. So coffee shops, even though they're in a very idyllic setting, they just don't work for me with my ADHD. Home sometimes is really difficult too because the comfort of home and the many distractions of home, you're like, oh, let's just see what's going on here. You know what I mean? Like, that can happen.
Oh, that side of my room is calling me. Why? I don't know.
And that's why sometimes Pomodoro sessions do work really well because they do give you that like 5-minute break. It's timed. You know when it's over. You can put the phone down kind of thing. Now I'm on a regimen of supplements to help me with the concentration. So once I can get back into writing, once the moving is over, then I feel more confident that I'll be able to focus for longer periods of time. But yeah, the blank page is one of the biggest nemesis to me with ADHD, especially if I'm starting a brand new project. Not just a brand new chapter, but a brand new any project. I just sit there. And there have been times where I've sat there for many minutes. And then I get overwhelmed because that's the other thing with ADHD is the executive dysfunction of like, I can't. And then you do everything else that you need to do as well that you've been putting off, but that is not the thing that you're supposed to be doing at this moment.
Yeah, my writing community, we call it procrastivity. Procrastivity, is it? That's like procrastinating and productivity together.
Yes. Yeah, like I'll go, oh, I need to run a load of laundry, or I'm just going to go pick up around the house, or I'm going to make this appointment that I've been avoiding. Because that's another thing with ADHD. It's like I hate calling to make doctor's appointments and things like that. It's like anxiety.
Just a sidebar. I'm telling you guys, all these things that she brings up about ADHD, I'm like, what the fuck? How did I not know that that's what this was?
I know.
I just assumed it was just my mental health issues, but I didn't know it specifically also was like very much ADHD symptoms that I just chalked it up to neurodivergence, but not that specifically. So anyways, I'm always blown away when she says something like, yeah.
Well, let me just give you an example of that. I was supposed to get my blood drawn recently to go through an entire panel of different tests to find out allergies and different things with food and with other things because I have eczema. So my doctor wanted to do all of that. Check my iron, my vitamin D, because those tend to be low a lot. It came up to the day, and I'm always really nervous because I have very small veins. It's very difficult to get blood from me, and people always think that they know best. Even when I tell them, like, hey, can you use a butterfly needle, or hey, you might need to use a vein finder with me, they're always like, no, I've done this for X amount of years. And then they go poking around in my arm, creating scar tissue. So, not the funnest experience. I also have 2 procedures coming up in June that require for me to be under general anesthesia, so I'm going to have an IV. So, I knew this going into my appointment, and I just couldn't. Like, I literally could not. I had to reschedule it. And then I spoke to my doctor, and I was just like, hey, this is really, really difficult for me. It's not just like a nervous fear thing. This is like I feel paralyzed and I won't go.
Mm.
And I know that that's not good for my health.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have an appointment with her this upcoming week to potentially get something to help with the anxiety, because I think people don't realize anxiety can be coupled with ADHD, and the ADHD can aggravate certain anxieties that you have. So it's a fun mix of things.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, because I am diagnosed depression and anxiety, but I also have PCOS, and that also perpetuates depression and anxiety. So then now learning things I thought were just quirks. No, they're not quirks. They're specifically ADHD things. And I'm like, oh. So yeah, it's sad and wild how much of it all intertwines and they all cross signals together. And so in other words, I completely like relate to everything you're saying, because the blank page for me, oh my God. Especially like you were saying, when starting a new project. For example, I do have a completely new project that I am starting that I need to start. And I have been paralyzed. I am overthinking and like panicking to even start, because I'm like, no. I got to figure it all out before I can start writing it.
Yes.
I don't, especially because I'm a discovery writer. I'm not even like a hardcore plotter. And so for those who don't understand, discovery writing is coupled with people that they call pantsers, who fly by the seat of their pants and just kind of write and figure it out as they go.
Yeah.
I'm somewhere in between. I discovery write with a plan. So I usually have like some form of outline, but then I let the story kind of come to me as I'm writing it.
Yeah.
So I don't need hyper planning. So the fact that my brain is going, no, we have to figure out all the possibilities.
Yes.
We start writing.
Fix all of the potential plot holes.
Yeah, that don't exist yet. And I literally was supposed to start this project 3 weeks ago. I haven't, because every time I try, I will open up my story Bible of what I have so far, and then I'll stop and go, I have to figure it out. I can't start.
I so relate to that. First of all, I am the same way. I used to be a heavy plotter, and then I realized that I would never start projects when I would overly try to plot out a story, because as inevitably I would go on, and basically I'm writing the story but in a sort of narration form, without any dialogue, without any of the nuances of the story, but just kind of writing out what is happening. And I do physically write it out as well, because that's always been a comfort for me. And I don't know if it's just the way that we were in school, where we had to physically write out a lot of things, but it's just more comfortable for me to do that than to type it out sometimes. Dictation I have used every once in a while, but it's more so of like, if I'm out and I don't have a piece of paper or notebook around me and I think of an idea, then I will put it in a voice memo and refer to it later. But when I would overly plot things, I would find plot holes. And let's be honest, if we really wanted to dissect every story that we have loved and read, we could find plot holes.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
It does take suspension of sort of disbelief, especially if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi or anything of that nature, for you to go, okay, that's possible, or okay, she made that decision instead of this more logical decision kind of thing. So you kind of have to give grace with certain things, but not me and my hyper perfectionism that also comes with ADHD. No, I have to figure out every little hole in the story and make it perfect. And then that would prevent me from even starting it in the first place. Now, when I started ghostwriting, I was given a very, very bare skeleton of a plot, and I had to fill in all the blanks. And that was like, okay. So I just started to write. And then I wrote an entire novella, 40,000 word novella. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. So instead of overly plotting and just never starting to begin with, or maybe starting it and only getting to a certain point where I feel like there's a plot hole and then it just falls off, I just wrote this whole thing. And it wasn't that hard. I was overthinking things. So now I have a general idea of what I want to do. And I go, there's always editing. There's always editing to change things. There's always editing, but I just need to get the story out is the important part. And you can still get stuck. My debut novel, or hopefully debut novel, which would be like a science fiction, I am 12 chapters in and I'm stuck because I feel like something, it's not right. Like you can't put your finger on it just yet. You're just like, I don't feel like this is where they should be right now. And so now I had to kind of give that a break. I went and I wrote a horror short story, which now I am entering into the editing process with. And I will eventually go back and I will look at it with fresh eyes.
That helps.
It really does help. But the trick that I've learned with blank pages, to go back to that point, is if I can't figure out how to start the first sentence, because to me, the first sentence is like the big shebang. Like that is how you're going to capture the reader's attention. So I need it to be the best first sentence you've ever read in your life. Sometimes I will start in the middle. I know that sounds weird. I will skip the first sentence and I'll decide to go back to it a little bit later. And not a lot later, just like maybe after I've hit some sort of stride, then I'll go back and be like, okay, what can I say now? But sometimes it's that first sentence that just really paralyzes me. So I have to get past that. And the only way sometimes to do it is to just skip it.
Interesting.
And go back. I don't think that's going to work for everybody. But it works for me to just skip it and go, okay, fuck the opening line, just get into the story, go back later and fix it, pretty much.
So it's interesting because the perfectionism, again, didn't know that was part of ADHD. That is so annoyingly crippling for me.
Yes.
Because one of the things I do when I write is I kind of edit as I go, which is a huge faux pas in the writing world. And it's because the perfectionist fixation, I don't know how people are like, just come back to it later. No. If I see it now, I gotta deal with it now. Because it will drive me crazy if I just leave it there. And it's hard because part of the perfectionism also is, like you said, it's just the first draft. Let yourself just write it. But my brain is going, no, it has to be perfect the first time around.
Yes.
And I almost don't allow myself the freedom and relaxation. Terry Pratchett, I think, they're famous for the saying that your first draft is you telling yourself the story. That's what all a first draft is. And then you can have another draft where now you put it together, fix it up for the reader. But it's the idea of just get it out first. And then the next draft you can start. That concept to me is one of the biggest things I struggle with, is allowing myself to not try to make this perfect first draft and just, figure it out. I'm like, no. It has to be this one draft. And then I'll edit that one draft and then we'll publish that one draft. That's not how it works, guys. But my brain doesn't want to accept a different way. So it's always that battle for me to be able to just freely write and allow myself to figure it out later.
Well, okay, it's daunting enough to write an entire novel, then to think about having to go back and rewrite that whole thing, that intimidates the fuck out of me. I think it's partially why I am so fixated on editing as I go along, because I'm in the same boat. And hey, for the people who can just slap anything on the page, that is so wonderful for you. I'm so happy for you. I wish I could do that. Even when I was doing the novellas and I had a time crunch because, you know, the person wanted it for a certain time. And the first one I struggled really hard because I finished the entire story in 20,000 words and they were like, no, I want 40,000. And I'm like, but it's good. 20,000, you don't. So then I had to flesh it out more. So all that to say is that it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. That's why there's no one way of doing it, because everybody has different challenges and obstacles, and everybody has different strengths as well. And one of my superpowers is editing in the moment. It's not the best, and you have to have some sort of boundary. There has to be a line of going, okay, I'm allowed to go back one time, and then I got to move on. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I get it. I get why some people say that that's not good, that's taboo. Congratulations, you must not struggle with ADHD, or you must not struggle with perfectionism, because that's not the reality for everybody. It's not the reality for us, certainly. Yeah. And trying to work against that, honestly, causes more of an anxiety than if I just give into it.
And then you just delay the process even more because you're overwhelmed and you walk away and you procrastinate even longer.
Yeah, you don't need to give yourself any more excuses to procrastinate. You have so many. And it's not even procrastination. Let's destigmatize this one thing that a lot of people say about ADHDers, which is that they're big procrastinators and they're lazy. Untrue. And it's not just labels that people put on others with ADHD. It's mostly what we tell ourselves. That we're lazy and we're procrastinators. I used to say that I was a procrastinator all the time. When I was in college, girl, I didn't study until the night before the test. I would always get good grades on the test, but I always thought that for me, I needed to have that information fresh in order to do well, because I have a little bit of testing anxiety. Not terribly. Like, if I'm confident with the material, not as much. There would be certain subjects like math where it'd be like... I was like, did I even learn this?
I was good at math, but I always second guessed my answers. I didn't trust myself. Even though I was really good at it and I worked it out on paper, I would always be like, what if this is wrong? What if I counted wrong? What if I added wrong? What if I subtracted wrong?
Testing anxiety, it is real. But the thing is, with procrastination, first of all, when you're procrastinating, it's not an unpleasant feeling. When you have executive dysfunction, you are not happy. Like, procrastinating involves you doing something other than the thing that you're supposed to be doing, and that's why we associate it with what we do. But when you're procrastinating, you're pushing it off voluntarily, right? Like, you're like, oh, I'd rather be doing this other thing. And so there's not this huge anxiety surrounding it, like, oh, I need to be doing this thing, but I physically cannot bring myself to do it. Like, I mentally cannot bring myself to do it. That's executive dysfunction. That is not procrastinating. Procrastinating is that you're voluntarily putting it off for whatever reason. You just don't want to do it right now. It's not interesting to you, which that is a factor with ADHD because we have less dopamine production than other people. So we need that dopamine hit. But typically it's just kind of like, I'd rather be doing this other thing. No, with people like us, we want to do that thing. Like, I want to write. I want to get that task done. I literally cannot. And sometimes if I try to in that state, I'll just stare at the blank page for like an hour.
I would literally open up my documents. 4 hours later, I haven't done anything on it. I've panicked. And like she said, I genuinely want to do the task. I want to do it. And I simply can't. And then the guilt and shame and beating yourself up happens immediately after. And it's just this vicious cycle that can last over 24 hours.
It's crazy. And what I've learned too with ADHD is that this, by the way, this is not an ADHD episode, but you know, it kind of colors everything in life. Negative consequences don't work for us. See, I always used to think that negative consequences did because when I was working, I was good at it. A lot of the ADHD things that I would struggle with at home wouldn't necessarily always carry over to my 9 to 5. And I don't know why that is. I do know that there was a fear of consequences there, and I thought that that's what was driving me. Same thing with like studying at the last minute. Oh shit, if I don't study, then I'm going to get an F on that test. Negative consequence, right? Nope. Apparently that doesn't work with us either. And it's true too, because I've had negative consequences happen to me, and that wasn't motivation enough for me to do the thing. I don't work a regular 9 to 5 because I'm concentrating on writing, on this podcast, on other pursuits. I'm trying to start a small business, but there are days when I find it hard to do any of that. And of course, I beat myself up about it. I go into a shame spiral. I'm learning to break free of that because I know that my brain doesn't function the way that everybody else's. And I'm married to someone who works from home, has a 9 to 5, is very routine. And I often will compare myself to that person and being like, oh my gosh, he's so accomplished. He's been in his career for the last 10 years. He's even younger than me. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? And it can really, really hurt your self-esteem. But what I had to realize is that there are going to be days, even with supplements that I'm taking, even with the things that I'm doing to help myself, I just cannot, like I have to literally argue. I'm having an argument in my brain. Get up, go take a shower. Go take a shower. I don't want to take a shower. I know you don't want to take a shower, but you need to go take a shower. But I don't want to get in there and I don't want to get wet. And then I get in the shower. Okay, now you got to get out of the shower. But I don't want to get out of the shower because I'm in the shower now.
Yep.
And see, I thought everybody's brain worked like that. It doesn't.
Again, I thought these were just quirks. And then realizing this is not how people normally think about doing tasks. Or
especially just like menial tasks like showering, brushing your teeth. Like you wouldn't think that I'd have to argue with myself to do something as simple as brushing my teeth. But I do. I do. And this is why it's hard for us to keep routines, because there will be days where we just don't want to do that thing that we need to do. And the only thing that we want to do is get our dopamine fix. And that will include just doing this all day. Because
it's an immediate, guaranteed satisfaction. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I would love to say that I get my 1,000 words a day. It doesn't work like that for me. I'm 38 years old and I'm still trying to put out a debut novel. Lucky for me that age is not a factor in publishing books. Because let's say my dream was to be a singer or an actor, I would have a lot more trouble breaking into the industry at this point than to publish a book. Now, getting a publishing contract or having my book on a bookshelf isn't necessarily like the end all be all. I mean, it's a great accomplishment, don't get me wrong. But just for me, knowing how my brain is and knowing how difficult it can be, just getting something done. I have to make myself pat myself on the back. I don't want to, because in my mind, I'm like, you didn't do anything. But that is an accomplishment in and of itself, and it's a struggle to even get there. So whenever I can finish something, when I finished that horror short story, oh my gosh, I was so proud of myself because I knew the struggle getting there.
You know what I'm excited for is when you finish your sci-fi, the first draft of it. First draft of it. I would encourage you, because I think I didn't even realize subconsciously how much it helped to just have the proof of accomplishment. When you finish on Amazon, you can go in and get a proof copy of it as it is. Yeah. Because you're not publishing it. You can make a temporary cover for it and everything. Because let me tell you, and for those who are not on YouTube, I'm showing proof of it. One of the books that I am in the editing process of, I had physically printed. Now, it's a behemoth because I printed it double spaced. So, because for editing purposes, I wanted the space in between.
Yeah, totally.
so that's why it's bigger than it should be also, and it is longer than it should be. Anyway, but the point is that physically having the book you finished writing made it so real that you accomplished it. And it's not just now another file in your computer.
Yeah.
And it gives you almost more of a vision of going, okay, this is going to be a book available to the public one day.
Yeah.
And so that would be, I'm excited because it's going to happen. You're going to finish that first draft. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited for you to physically hold it in your hand while you edit it. Or even just to have it.
Yeah, no, I was already, the moment you showed it to me and you told me that was possible, I was like, I already had it in my head that I was going to be doing that, because to have that visual would be super helpful and it would make me feel a sense of accomplishment. Mm. It is daunting. I will say that for me, the writing is the most fun part. The plotting, the writing is the most enjoyable part. I think the editing is something that I struggle with.
Which I find interesting because you are very much an editor brain.
I am an editor brain for other people. For myself, because I am so critical of my own writing, it just never feels good enough. It never feels done. And I have to put myself in the mindset of, we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for something that's going to win a Pulitzer, at least not now. You need to relax, take some breaths. And if it feels good enough, it doesn't have to feel perfect. It doesn't have to feel like this is it, that moment. But if it feels good enough, that's incentive to move forward. Yeah. So I'm trying to retrain my thinking in certain ways, which I think is part of the writing process, is not being an obstacle to yourself and to finishing something and to editing it and to getting it out there. I've also learned that I'm very temperamental. I don't know how you feel about this, but when it comes to allowing other people to read my work, you have a friend who read the horror story. I still haven't even looked at her comments yet.
For real?
Well,
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Sidebar?
Yeah, go ahead.
The first novel that I officially wrote, which was the YA dystopian.
Yeah.
I saved money to have it edited by someone. This is 9 years ago or something. Yeah. Maybe more. I only read the quick, I guess, because what it is there's the in-document notes, and then they give you the document of like overall feedback.
Yes.
I only read the overall feedback. I procrastinated out of fear and panic to read the actual in-document notes. It has been 10 years. I still haven't read that.
Desiree. I do not plan on waiting 10
Please
years.
Don't do that.
But when she first gave it to me, I was on my period and I was like, I'm very emotional right now. I don't want to read it in this moment. And so I decided I was going to wait. Then the moving started to happen. So once we're settled into the new place, I do want to open it up, read it. I think I read like 1 or 2 comments and I was like, because it's not that I don't want my work to be criticized. I tell people, I'm like, tear it apart. Tell me your honest opinion.
That's not it. That's not exactly.
It's trying to figure out what to take in and change and what I'm like, no, I'm sticking by this kind of thing. And making that decision of, okay, this particular person didn't really like this, but I really love it and it's a huge integral part of the story and you have your own reasons, right? Figuring out what you want to stick to as far as like, I'm not going to change this versus taking the criticism and figuring out how you can change it and make it better. Because the reality is that people are always going to have criticism for your writing. Even if you take everything, all the feedback that people give you and you change it according to how they like it, you hand it to somebody else, they might have a completely different opinion about it.
Yep.
And I was part of a writing critique group, and there were certain times where I thought I was being very clear with my story, and certain people like did not know what was going on. And then I had certain people who I really looked up to who was like, no, I see where you're going. And then I realized, I'm like, okay, one, not everybody's qualified to
Mm.
really beta read and
Mm-hmm.
edit. This is why, like you saved up money to get somebody professional because you wanted
Yeah.
to do it right. But also, there's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
People like different things. So
Mm-hmm.
they may not really care for it, but then you might have other people who really love that aspect of your story.
Yes.
So that's the hard part for me of like,
Mm.
what do I change? What do I keep?
Mm.
What about you? What's hard for you when it comes to editing?
Well, I will say that I definitely encourage, if possible, give it to
Mm-hmm.
more than one person.
Yeah.
Because, like Heather said, different people, again, art is subjective. People are going to have different understandings of things, different preferences to things. People's life experiences are different. So, like she said, some people are like, "Ooh, I totally got where you were going with that." Others were like, it was over my head. I didn't get that at all. For example, I had a couple friends who are writers and authors who read the book that I'm editing right now that I showed you guys.
Yeah.
And one of them, she's amazing. She loved it. She gave me feedback in the document. But there was things that I wanted specifically in the sense of what can I remove from this
Yeah.
specifically. And at the time, she didn't really see a lot that she felt that could be removed.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I gave it to another author friend and she loved the book, which was very
Mm-hmm.
encouraging. But she was like, so this section, you don't need it. This section, kind of dragging. This part, actually take out
Okay.
chapter. Yeah. And she was so nervous because we met up,
Yeah.
which this could be helpful too for
Mm-hmm.
this type of feedback. We decided to meet backstage face to face virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like that actually made it better for her. I think it helped her gauge my reaction and then
Mm-hmm.
gave her more freedom to really tell me what she was feeling to help improve the
Totally.
story. And I literally, she was so scared. I was like, no, so and so, trust me. Tell
Yeah.
me, because this book is like 25,000 words too long. So if I need to take something out, don't sugarcoat it. Let me
Yeah.
know. And she really helped me figure out, okay. And at the end of the day, I agreed with it. Now, when
Mm.
I went to a critique group for the first novel I wrote 10 years ago,
Mm.
I didn't agree with it at first, and that was an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
So you sometimes have to sit with it for a day or two because they told me that they didn't like the dual POV aspect of it, and certain things were not necessary. And I was inside boiling. I was like,
Rage.
how dare you not see how clearly perfect this is? And then literally 48 hours later, I was sitting in front of my document and I was like, oh,
They're right.
okay, I see. And I had to rewrite it.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, better because of it. So it's one of those things I definitely encourage writers out there. Find multiple people
Mm-hmm.
to not proofread, I'm sorry, beta read your stories
Yeah.
because you're going to get different perspectives. And it's not that any perspective is wrong.
Yeah.
It's, figuring out overall what people think of it. And then, like Heather said, stand by the things you do want to stand by. Because
Yeah.
the short, dark dystopian I got published in the Canadian press, the Stygian Society, I had to work with their editor. I was panicking. For the short stories that I co write under a pen name, we have an
Yeah.
editor. We know her, the editor,
Yeah.
but still, it was always a little nerve wracking to figure out what their notes were going to be.
Yeah.
This
Totally.
this person I did not know at all. So here was a complete
Mm.
stranger who was an editor who I hadn't had any conversations with. We didn't get to meet yet.
Yeah.
I was panicking about her notes. And
I don't blame you.
there was one note that I had to stand by my decision. And I
Mm-hmm.
was nervous about that because I was like, I'm going to tell the stranger I don't agree with this note and that the reason I chose to do it, there's a reason. And you know what, guys? Stand up for yourself when you feel like you're in the
Yeah.
right, because I did. And then she was like, oh, I see what you mean. Okay, keep it. And it was fine.
Yeah.
And it was great.
It's your baby. So you should be standing up for it. And I will say, joining the writing critique group for me was really a good exercise in learning how to take criticism because we meet in person. So they read it ahead of time and then they send you like a day or two before the Google Doc with all of their inline comments. You read them. Some of them you're like, okay. And then others you're like, oh yeah. And then you get there and you talk about it and you discuss it. So you're like face to face. So I have to control my face.
And we are Hispanic women.
Yeah.
That is not a forte of ours.
Be like, oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or just keep that neutral blank face of.
I'm really good at that. I actually had a boss, a previous employer, tell me that I was unreadable. And I was like, that's what I like.
Yes.
Because they were giving me criticism. I don't think that the criticism was warranted. But I mean, I came to find out later that that previous boss was an alcoholic. So there were lots of things going on. But they're like telling me this, and I'm just like, I could just see them slowly losing their confidence as the conversation went on. And they're like, I can't read you. And I'm like, I'm just listening. Like, I mean, I don't know what kind of response she was expecting from me. If she was like, oh my God, oh yeah. You know, that's not me. That never has been me. But on the inside, when I'm hearing people critique my work, on the inside, I'm like, you know, Lamaze breathing exercises.
Give me the paper bag. Yes.
Yeah. On the outside, I'm like, interesting. Yes, I'll take a note of it. And then you're typing too at the same time, so taking notes on the things that they're saying. And then you have to like sit down with those notes and figure out what you want to do with them. And there was a lot of good feedback, especially because I had started to write that horror short story while I was still in that group. And so I got a lot of really good feedback. I mean, I changed the intro to that story entirely. Because the intro initially had you go into a very intense part of the action, like right away. And that has a lot to do with the way that I used to write with YA and like capturing the reader's attention immediately. And then I was like, actually, let me set the scene first. And then let's get into that. And that came about because of their critiques. And now I like it so much better. Whereas before, I think there was a little bit of resistance in me about changing that.
You know, it's interesting because now that you say that, because I did read the first part of your story in Colorado. And it makes sense that the horror genre is different that way. Because usually you want to create almost that eerie calm in the beginning of just like setting up this what seemingly seems like just a normal life in these people's lives. And then you're like slowly introducing creep factors and till, you know, things happen. So that's interesting because I can totally see how with the horror genre, it's different that way. Because even with romance, because we wrote action, sci-fi, YA, and it's very much about gripping them with some type of action, inciting incident, life-changing scenario. Whereas with contemporary romance or even romantic suspense, yes, you sometimes want to create something catching in the beginning, but it's less in your face than action type stories. So
and that too, with that short horror story, because it's a short story, you do have to get into the crux of it really quickly. You only have so many words, like you have at most 10,000 words if you're wanting to get it published somewhere. And for me, it was also a very interesting story because it didn't have any dialogue, not up until the very, very end of the story. So everything is happening in a sort of narration style in this one character's, not necessarily her perspective, but like that's the only perspective you get because she's the only person in the story. So it's very interesting to play around with different elements that you're kind of like not used to because it's a completely different writing style than, let's say, my science fiction novel that I'm working on. It was a really nice departure and exercise and almost easier in a way, weirdly enough. Maybe because it was a short story, maybe because my expectations of myself were really low. Of like, well, I've never written in this genre. I don't know. I just started reading this genre. I don't know if I'd be good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then to hear positive feedback really boosted my confidence. And yet it still took me pushing myself hard to get to that point of actually finishing it, because I had gotten to like a halfway point. I had actually given it out to some people to read. And let me tell you, it is very hard to find people to read your stories.
Mm-hmm.
Even people who seemingly are like interested, ask you about it, want you to send it to them. Crickets.
No, I mean, I have a whole group of writers that we're in a group chat together and everything. And then there's just the logistic aspect that everyone else also not only has stuff going on in their lives, they're working on their own writing. So it can be hard because even with them, it's like, you think I have this arsenal of people I can just throw my stories to whenever.
No.
And that's not the reality. Like it took a while to even find the second person I got to read my story. Granted, it's not a short story either. It's a huge chunker of a story, but it took a while to even get them involved. I have another friend who I work with who would have loved to have read it, but she was like, I just really can't right now. I was like, I know you literally cannot add one more thing on your plate, but I know that they really wanted to. So it's hard to get people to commit to, well, not only read it, but then get back to you on a timely manner-ish.
Girl, I wish people could just read it. That's all I need. Just read it and tell me if you enjoyed it. You don't even have to give me like intense feedback, because a lot of the people that I've sent it to that have liked the premise of the story or found it interesting, they're not beta readers. They're not people that I would necessarily expect to get feedback from. But they are people that I'm like, hey, I'm interested because you're a reader. And though you may not have like an English degree or have experience editing people's work or can give me feedback to improve the story, you can at least tell me how the story made you feel. You can tell me how you felt about this character. If you saw the twist in the story, was it too predictable? Like those types of things that the average reader can tell you, those are the things that I'm expecting, which is not much. And even that I can't get. So it is difficult, especially if you don't have a literary agent, if you don't have your own editor. We're doing everything as indie authors, people with no publishing contracts, people who are just trying to put pen to paper and get a story out there. And even with us, like, and then your own life can take precedent sometimes over writing. But all that to say, I do think in an ideal world, everything that I described in terms of like having the right atmosphere, having tools in place that will help you be as focused and productive as possible, giving yourself grace at times, especially if you struggle with things like ADHD, anxiety, depression, allowing yourself to have moments of just, I'm just not going to do it today. I'm going to do it tomorrow.
Yeah, which can be really hard because again, your mind will try to come at you with guilt and shame for not getting it done today and calling you lazy and procrastinator and all these things. But I think it's definitely something that on a daily we need to try to train ourselves to give ourselves that grace, like Heather was saying. Because again, like personally, I've had so much life shit going on in the last year and a half, maybe longer, honestly, that it has delayed my publishing goals tremendously. And it's been really hard because you'll see people that you follow for years and out of nowhere, you didn't even know some of them were writing a book. And they're like, oh my God, I'm getting published by a publisher tomorrow. And you're like, when the hell were you even writing? I'm still here talking about my one book that I'm editing for 5 years. You know, like it's hard not to play the comparison game as well when years are passing you by and you're unfortunately just not yet able to give all the time necessary. Because like Heather said, we're also doing it as indie authors. And, you know, people who talk down about self-publishing, it is so hard. Both avenues are difficult for a writer, but you have to also realize everything is on your shoulders as the indie author. everything. And there's just so much that goes into it behind the scenes, even on a business level, people
Yeah.
don't know about. And all that is, again, on your shoulders to figure out and make happen and try to strategize the best way to give your book a chance in the end. And that's not even the writing process, which is the fun part for me.
Yeah, exactly. But it's all necessary.
Yes.
The writing process, the completion process, the editing process, the editing again, and then editing again, and then
finding beta readers or alpha readers or have a critique partner and get them to read it. And
then you gotta get the literary agent. And likely if you're even watching or listening to this episode, you probably already know more or less what the writing process is. Like, we don't need to let you know every little step. It's more about our own personal journeys, but we're still in the phase of writing and editing at this point. We have not locked down literary agents or publishing contracts, but we will get there. And we're going to take you on that journey with us. And hopefully in not too long of a time, I'm keeping it purposely vague.
Good.
You'll get to hear some good news about both of our writing pursuits. Desiree with multiple stories, plus her self-publishing that she does with her writing partner under a pen name.
And possibly something new along the way.
Yes, that's true. I don't know anything about the new project, I don't think. So
we'll just leave it at that.
And then with me, the goal is to first publish somewhere this short story. Haven't figured out where yet. And then concentrate on the actual novel to then get a literary agent to then yada, yada, yada. So we'll see what happens. But I will say this, for anybody who may be listening who is in our position as well. You are a writer because you write, period.
Yes.
Not because you get published. Not because everybody knows who you are, loves your stories, all of that stuff. And I'm saying this to myself because I have a hard time telling people that I'm a writer. Even though I have written in other forms. Like, there are articles you can find online that were written by me. There's a whole slew of novellas that were written by me that you'll never know because I ghost wrote them, so I can never tell you. But that's my writing. Regardless of that, I was still a writer even before that, and I still have a hard time and a struggle because when people hear that, they're like, "Oh, what have you written? Have I read it?"
Exactly. It's always the follow up of, "Oh, so you're published. Where can I find your book?" And it's like, and
I love
and I hate that because your mind lies to you and starts saying, "Oh, because you're not published, you're not a writer." But that's not true.
Yeah.
You write, you're a writer. Period.
And I think because we're in a very achievement and accomplishment driven society where we have to have a list of accolades, it's natural for people to follow up with that question.
Yes.
And that's why I always also encourage writers to have some sort of online portfolio, even if it's just a free little portfolio where you can put snippets of your work or whatever, or a website that you create on WordPress. Who cares?
Even a free website where you just blog. And as a blog, you're putting your little snippets of stuff in.
Exactly. That way, when somebody asks you, you can direct them somewhere. You don't have to feel that ick of like, I don't have a book on a shelf right now. And you can feel good about the fact that you are actively putting your work out there. Because I think for me, anyways, and I'm sure Desiree can agree or disagree, there is that goal there. There is something that I do want to accomplish, having something of mine be published and published in a traditional way. Or if I do self-publishing, I want it to be successful. So there is that goal regardless. And I think achieving that goal is going to feel really good when it happens.
Well, yes and no. And I'll say that because now it's a little easier to say I'm a writer. What I don't say is I'm an author. And I forget that I am, because I do have a short story traditionally published in a Canadian press in a book that was a collection. And then I also self-published now 18 books with my co-writer on Amazon. And yet somehow almost still there's a struggle with me to believe and go, I'm an indie author. And I have one short story traditionally published as an author. I don't know why that's still hard for me to say. It's like my mind still says it's not real because A, the books are not on a shelf all over
Yeah.
Barnes and Nobles. And because we have this image of a publishing house put you on a book tour, people know who you are, people have heard of your book.
Yeah.
It's like, if it isn't that one very small, like maybe 1 to 5% of authors who get traditionally published have that moment. There are a whole list of what they call mid-list authors who people don't even know about. And sadly, that's a whole discussion for another day. The publishing industry is actually not the most reliable or the best to its authors, sadly. So unless you're like this shiny toy that's getting all the attention, they don't back up their other authors financially. And so it's really sad that that's the case. And we trick ourselves into thinking then, unless we are that shiny toy that has the attention, it's on Book Talk, their books are on the shelves, they're getting the book tours, then we're not a real author. We're not a real writer. And that's not true.
No, it's not. And it's the same thing with somebody who is a singer but doesn't have a record contract, or maybe they belong to a really small indie label and they're not as famous as other singers, and or maybe you're an actor but you're doing commercials, and it's levels of success that if we are going to label ourselves a certain thing, or if we're going to be proud of it, which we should be proud regardless, but it's that mentality of, if I'm going to be proud of it, I have to reach that top tier level of success in order to be able to feel confident in saying something like that. Just write. Yeah. However you need to. Give yourself breaks when you need to. Revisit certain things. I walked away from 9 to 12 chapters of an entire novel that took me forever just to even get to that point. Because I had reached a roadblock of sorts, did a completely different project, actually finished that project, which is a sense of accomplishment that I needed to now then return. Everybody's different. Everybody's routine is different. Everybody's weaknesses and strengths are different. Do what is best for you. You can listen all day to everybody's writing routines and glean so much good information from all of them to input into your own writing routine. But at the end of the day, if it's not fitting, if you feel like you're struggling with it, just throw it out. Go with what naturally comes to you. So for me, even though I know I can't sit there and self-edit all day, every day, I allow myself just a little bit because I need it. I need it.
For me, I feel usually an accomplishment with finishing a chapter. So then when I return, I'm starting a new chapter. But before I start the new chapter, I will let myself reread the previous chapter completely. And that's where usually I do the little edits. And then I feel ready to start the next chapter. So that's it. I'm like, all right, time to move on.
Yeah.
But like Heather was saying, remember, no matter what you come across, especially on social media, there is no one way to do anything creative, period.
Yes.
But writing wise, writing routine wise, don't feel like it has to look any certain way. If anyone out there is telling you it does, it's baloney. Don't listen to them, because we are all different and our creative process is different and looks different from person to person. Even to people who do the same thing, it will still look different in some variation because we're all unique human beings. So use everyone's routines as inspiration. And like Heather was saying, try things out. If they work, they work. If they don't, they don't. And that's okay. Figure out what's going to benefit your writing process specifically. And then remember, enjoy it. Because if you're not enjoying it, then what the hell is the point, guys?
So for real. And the shame and the guilt and whatever it is that you do to yourself when you don't meet a certain bar or marker or whatever, that's going to hold you back more than just doing what you can. So no, I may not be as disciplined as some other writers to get 10,000 words in a day, but I can get maybe 2,000 words in, and I can feel really good about that, because if I feel good about that instead of shaming myself, then I'm more likely to be able to write the following day instead of just being in a shame cycle of like, oh, I suck. You know what I'm saying?
thing.
And I
Yep.
think more people than not experience what we experience in terms of not always meeting the expectations that you have for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
So with that being said, for our creatives out there, it doesn't have to be writers. It can be anybody that creates anything.
Mm-hmm.
What is your process? How do you overcome your obstacles? How did you learn about your weaknesses and strengths and cater your routines to those things? We would love to hear from you. If you have any tips, especially for us ADHDers struggling to be focused, please let us know. Apps that are useful. Desiree already introduced me to some in this episode that I probably will be using.
I'll actually try to link some of them that I did mention so you can check out there.
Let us know the apps, the techniques, anything that has helped you in your journey to be focused. Even if you don't have ADHD, you never know what might be helpful for us. And with that being said, Desiree, take it away.
So friends, please make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, do all the things, whether you're on YouTube or on a podcast platform. Definitely leave us comments. Heather is always answering them. 9 times out of 10, it's Heather who's answering them. Thankfully, I'm so grateful for her that she's on top of that for us. So please, especially over on TikTok, for whatever reason, people love our TikTok and they're over there and the engagement is higher there. So yeah, visit us on social medias. And then also, friends, if you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to the podcast, that would be fantastic, because that helps the algorithm and helps other people who may like our content to also find us. So this was fun. Like Heather said in a previous episode, when it comes to books and writing, we love it and we can talk about it all day. So if there are any other episode ideas in regards to writing that you want us to do, let us know. We would happily get on top of that. So until next week, friends, see you then.
Bye.
Bye.